Uh, Ugh. Have you ever had an energetic hangover? We all know what it's like to have a hangover from drinking too much alcohol the night before. Or maybe doing too many drugs. But do you know about an energetic hangover? I could think of energetic hangover in both the positive and the negative aspects, in the sense that, let's say, Tuesday, you had so much positive, high energy experience that Wednesday you came down. But what I'm really fascinated with is what would be considered kind of a negative energy hangover. To give you an example, I watched this film last night called Foxcatcher, which is the inspiration, the seed film for this video. And it's about these two wrestlers who get involved with John DuPont of the DuPont dynasty, which is, at the time of the video, the film, the wealthiest dynasty in America. And essentially it's a study in pathology of one of the wrestlers, the younger one named Mark Schultz, and also the concurrent pathology of John DuPont, and they get into this kind of father-son relationship. There's also a second wrestler who is the older brother named Dave Schultz, and this is all based on a true story. And it takes place on the estate of the DuPont dynasty, so that there's a huge mansion there, there's a training facility, and hundreds of acres of land where there's horses roaming free, etc. And it's the creme de la creme of wealth. And in this context, like I said before, so much pathology is explored, so that by the end of the movie, it's like you've just been in the boxing ring for 15 rounds of pathology, right? And it is a cumulative pathology. It just builds incrementally. And you can see the main character, played amazingly by Channing Tatum, he's, by the end of the film, I mean, he's just outright debilitated and paralyzed by this incremental increase of pathological energy. And the film is masterful in that sense. But by the end of that film, I'm like, oh my God. It's so dark and heavy. And also, in the context of American patriotism. So, this endeavor on behalf of Mr. DuPont was to get this high profile for himself and his dynasty by aligning with two Olympic gold medalists who won gold for their wrestling skills. And this is set in the 1980s. And it's based on a true story. I'm not going to give away the ending. But so I was going to film an Improvisutra after that movie last night, because I do one a day. But it was late, and I was knocked out. Like, my energy was knocked out by this film. And the film was a masterpiece, I would say. And it had like 4 Academy Award nominations. But it's like being in the mind of a serial killer for a couple hours, although there wasn't a serial killer in the film. So then afterwards, I was knocked out, ready to go to bed. Because when you go to sleep, you're pressing the reset on your energy. Because you go to sleep, and you go into dreaming, and then the dreamless state. The dreamless state is pure causal energy. It's replenishing. It's the energy of source, but you're just unconscious. Most people are unconscious during that state. And it resets you, right? And the next day, you're ready to roll. But if the energetic hit was so extreme the day before, it can have a hangover effect. I know this from the time before I started meditating. I was in a constant state of energetic abyss. I was in an abyss for years, black hole. And it wouldn't, the pain was so intense it wouldn't reset through sleep. So the next day I would wake up where I left off the day before, which was this massive black hole in the center of my chest, and what's called the subtle heart. And that that happened a lot, frequently, for like 8 years, between 19 and 27, until I started doing sitting meditation. Anyways, my point is that I woke up this morning and I was reset, and I thought about the heaviness of this movie and how heaviness can be masterpieced. It's really amazing, this phenomenon of artistic prowess, where you have a director and these consummate actors collaborating with technicians and a film crew and a movie studio, and then they create this masterpiece of art that is like a freaking 1,000-ton weight in your soul when you watch it, right? So imagine like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci applied to the pain body. And so you're like, whoa, you're double captivated. One, because you recognize the kind of artistic genius that's gone into this production. And then the second aspect of captivation, or captivity, is you're like in the pain body, right? You're in the pain body. You're getting a guided tour of pathology, and it's being done masterfully, weaving you in. So like the main character, you're kind of like inextricably bound to this pathological energy by the end of the film. And he gets spat out. So after that, I was just, it's a really profound moment for contemplation, because when I think about how human beings can create the most majestic art, magnificent pieces of genius, and yet it's saturated at every point with all this negativity. But at the same time, there's this quote-unquote positivity in this particular film, because it's about winning the Olympics and winning the world championships in wrestling. So there is this kind of heroic journey for everybody involved, but it's this heroic journey inside a kind of a hellscape on the estate of the DuPont dynasty. And at the end of it, I was just thinking about like a larger context of this film. Like, what does it do? What does it do for the actors? What does it do for the director? What does it do for the film crew? What does it do for the production company? What does it do for the audience? So I think about how when we contemplate this kind of pathological energy, and I think you would agree with me by the end of the film, you'll see if you watch it, when we contemplate it and we let it in, because we can become that which we contemplate, we sink into this kind of vortex of dark, painful, hellish energy. And so I naturally think, well, what good is that? Like, why would I want to do that to myself? And yet, at the same time, concurrently, there's this sublime architecture, which is the narrative of the story, and all the brilliance that's gone into its construction. So you've got this skeleton of kind of luminosity that you can see if you've got the right antenna. Or even if you don't, you can still pick it up intuitively. And you're like, wow, this is an amazing film. Wow, I'm in hell. And so I think about the heaviness, and I'm like, so much heaviness. And, you know, another thing comes to mind is the mainstream news media, and I'm unplugged from that. I don't participate in that at all. Because for me, it is basically propaganda. It's pathology that's pumped into the brains of citizens, and it gets them in a state of agitation and mental toxicity, and they just frickin' live there. And then they wonder why they're so agitated and irritated and agonized. Well, that's because of what you put in your mind, right? So, you know, one question is there a place for this kind of limited exposure to artistic grandeur that serves up pathology and negative energy, right? Is it, what are the various purposes that may be served by a film like Foxcatcher. And notice how I'm actually trying to grok productivity from this experience. Because the basic experience that I have is like, what the fuck? That was painful. That was fucking painful. And then another perspective leaped out and started riding parallel with it, which was, yeah, but that was a majestic film. Put them like Tonto and the Lone Ranger riding side by side in the West. So I think about generally, I tried, and I don't do this a lot because I'm very suspicious of this whole quote-unquote paradigm. I'm suspicious of the word paradigm. FYI. But this kind of notion about utility in a global sense. Only because when we start, if we're not careful, and we really subscribe to this notion of global utility, we can become these kind of automated individuals who are living in adherence to a program that we've devised in our mind. We have a concept of the world, and we end up saying, well, how can I save the world? How can I help the world? And on the one hand, that's actually noble because we're having a global consciousness, a world-centric mind. On the other hand, there could be a legitimation crisis there because it's just like, oh, you have a concept of the world. It is a concept, and then you're serving that concept. So if we're not careful, it's like that's a shrink. That's a straitjacket. Because we're so much more vast than any concept, and reality is so much more vast than a concept of reality, or in this context, a concept of the world. And then you think about it, there are millions of people who have their individual concepts of the world. And this person's serving their concept of the world, this person's serving their concept of the world, and they're trying to make the world a better place. So millions of people have all their concepts of making the world a better place. They're naturally different. And, well, hopefully the world becomes a better place. But if I'm a pathological entertainment mogul, or in the case of the DuPont dynasty, a pathological chemical company mogul, because he was the DuPont started off as the artillery and ammunition supplier for the United States and back in the 1800s, and then they grew into the largest chemical company in the United States. Maybe even the world, I don't know. So that's how they made their billions. So that's their version of making the world a better place. Ammunitions, being a chemical company, and then of course other people have their versions. So we all have our different versions. And then there's this meta possibility that if I'm serving a concept, what does that do to my identity? And this is really brilliantly explored in Zen Buddhism, or Vajrayana Buddhism, or Mahayana Buddhism, where there's this thing called the Bodhisattva vow. Now, the Bodhisattva vow is, I vow to wake up for the sake of all sentient beings. So you wake up first to your identity as the Buddha nature, and then you're like, I'm gonna frickin' wake up all these other peeps. You know, and then in some iterations, it's like, I'm going to postpone Maha-Nirvana, which is the ultimate release, and keep reincarnating as a bodhisattva, liberate these mofos. And that's really cool. But then you run into a real legitimation crisis there. Right? Because in Mahayana Buddhism, and I'll speak specifically of Zen, you are developing an awareness that's transconceptual. So then you have to develop a relationship to this concept of the Bodhisattva vow, or this concept of waking up. So the concept takes you to the end of concepts. And then you have this identity beyond concepts, and you have a new relationship to concepts. So the Bodhisattva vow is one of those concepts that can take you to the end of concepts, and then you can't, because it's a koan, right? How can I save all sentient beings? That I have to be infinite. And so that actually creates a crisis. Because you think to yourself, I can't do that. But that's my vow. I'm never going to stop until I do it. Right? So you're saving the world according to a concept. And that's some heavy shit. I dealt with a bodhisattva vow in my 20s, probably my early 30s too. And that shit crushed me. It was a very, very heavy koan for me. A very, very heavy paradox. Which is gorgeous, because it actually meant that I couldn't get out from under it, and I had to go through it, right? So I was just thinking, in the context of the Foxcatcher, I was like, okay, well, what are the producers and the actors, and what do they think they're giving? And maybe they don't think they're giving at all. The thing about DuPont in the film, what he thought he was giving was a reinvigoration of American patriotism. He wanted to align himself with these wrestlers and increase American self-esteem, especially for the youth. And so his act was one of a national importance. And he thought, America was the greatest country in the world, and he wants to strengthen it again. And he does this by supporting the American Olympic wrestling team. Okay? Now that sounds very noble, except that there's a pathological energy inside of him, and you start to see it really early on. He's a sympathetic character, though. So, do I really honor this film by asking what good it does? Because I'm clear on what bad it does. Bad. Like, imagine watching this film 10 hours a day, every day, and you would sink below an ant. Ants would be crawling on you, you'd feel so low. So, then the next question is it worth watching even once? And I've had the same question with respect to horror films. I don't watch horror films. The closest I've ever got to horror was The Walking Dead. Or because I just thought that was brilliant. The reason, though, it was brilliant is because it had something in it that I'd never really seen before. And I ate it up. And it's what I call post-apocalyptic ethics. Okay? Post-apocalyptic ethics. When the world is over and you still survived, how do you behave? Because what happens is you have the ethical structure from the prosperity that preceded the apocalypse. So all that great morality that you got to enjoy as a member of a luxurious civilization is now being called into question, because in the case of Walking Dead, you have zombies everywhere. So you basically have 4 different kinds of enemies. 5 different kinds of enemies. Okay, you have zombies. That's an enemy. You have the other human beings who aren't part of your tribe. That's an enemy. You have the people who are part of your tribe who are a potential enemy. That's 3. And number 4, you have the enemy inside yourself. Okay? Which is very real in a post-apocalyptic landscape. Very real. Because of all these other enemies, then you got to figure out how to deal with this inside yourself. And you can betray yourself. You really can. Because you've got different levels of morality going on, and you got different kinds of enemies outside of you, and it gets extremely complicated really fast. And then the 5th enemy would just be life itself. Like, it's just the basic problems that life would throw at you. Like if you're rummaging for food somewhere and you ate some spoiled beans and they almost killed you. That kind of thing. Or a dog with rabies bites you. So when I watch that kind of stuff, the utility of it, the values of it, really become apparent to me. So then I bring that back into Foxcatcher, and I'm like, what is the value of watching something that's so heavy, that makes me feel so heavy, that I get an energetic hangover the next day? Well, as you can see, my soul is really crunching on this, really crunching and contemplating it. And that itself, actually, is a benefit. So it's like now the muscle of contemplation has got something new to exert upon and develop itself and its own stamina. And that's good. Because I said this to a friend the other day on Facebook, meditation, contemplation, being faithful to my art, these are things that make me happy. Contemplation is huge, and there is a dynamic intricacy between meditation and contemplation. Okay? And for myself, the more that I meditate, the more I can contemplate. Because the more I meditate, the more I can actually become intimate with anything and everything that arises. And then I contemplate it. Because what happens is, unless we develop a very lucid and expansive and nourishing worldview of things, which can always evolve and does always evolve, then we actually are living in smaller worldviews that can act like cages of the mind, our own personal matrix. So contemplation objectifies and liberates and expands and explores and discovers and nourishes and enjoys the manifest realm of the mind, of the heart, of the emotions. But where do you get the stamina for that kind of enterprise? Well, in my case, I get it from meditation, so I can continue to contemplate. All right? So what is the value of contemplating all this toxic energy of the Foxcatcher when it becomes apparent that it takes me down and it gives me a hangover the next day? Right? Well, ultimately, here's the thing. Do we have the stamina for play? Do we have the stamina for play? Because the pain points are theoretically infinite. All the pain that we have access to, our individual pain body, collective pain body, that we could access that at every different point and plug right into all this pain and be overwhelmed with it. But what's cool is that we have some choice there ultimately. If we develop enough psycho-spiritual stamina from our spiritual practice or whatever consciousness practice that we have, in my case meditation, contemplation, then I can actually access a lot of pain selectively. I can make that decision, I can choose, or I can put it away. Now, why would I want to expose myself to all this negativity and pain? Well, because in that dimension, there's a lot of brilliance too, as in the case of this Foxcatcher, which was amazingly done. I learned from the artistry of it, but I also learned to play inside of negative energy without being taken down. In other words, to surf on pain points without going under. Now, I can really feel a lot of pain without going under. That's an art, I've noticed. Feeling a lot of pain without going under. Because there truly is a lot of pain in this reality that we inhabit as human beings on this planet. So much pain. But what is our relationship to it? Do we go under into a black hole? Are we so averse to pain that we can't actually touch other souls with compassion and be intimate with them because we're so averse to pain? We can't inhabit pain with them. So anytime someone shows up with some pain, we kind of have to put it at arm's length, dissociate from their pain because we're dissociated from our own pain. And we don't actually have the capacity to endure it, even savor it, and see that it is also divinity. It is. There is nothing in this universe that is not Godhead. Pain included. Your pain, my pain, the pain of everything, everyone. And so, when we actually develop a very lucid relationship to that pain, it is possible to enjoy it, destroyed by it, and it is also possible to play with it. And that requires a certain kind of stamina and endurance and joie de vivre that is worth aspiring to. So that, I believe, is what I take away from the heaviness of the magnificent film Foxcatcher. Thank you very much for watching today. Take care.